As we are well aware, when it comes to the third biggest entry of a trilogy, whether it be a movie, OVA, or a video game compilation, the third entry of a trilogy tends to lose steam if the same formula is repeated from the last two sequels in some junction. This usually tailors to the choice of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, letting the creators generally play it safe with some essence of a film that has kicked up some immediate success in the last iterations. Sadly, the Thor films have generally not been as popular in the MCU as one would imagine. For instance, Thor the Dark World is currently ranked as the worst Marvel Cinematic Universe feature film of all time, especially if we cite our research and overall scores from Rotten Tomatoes. Most of the criticisms of the sequel tend to say that this sequel is boring, uninspiring, and not even worth any of the popularity that Loki had coming back and teaming up with Thor as a fragile alliance, and it wasn't enough to bring any weight to this movie. I've seen the first Thor movie and it was quite alright, it was decent, but I feel as though the movie had an off-putting pacing as the movie grinded to a halt the second Thor was exiled from Asgard and they started to focus on more real-world shenanigans with Jane Foster. It felt like a portion of the movie didn't belong to the overall world that Thor was centered on, as this was his origin story focused on his character. While I didn't care for the Asgardian plight as deeply as I should have because #convey emotion, there were some MCU films where they had intimidating villains, interesting scenarios, and interesting action sequences. There was a charm in the first Thor movie, and it had a decent climax. That didn't translate over well apparently to the rampant snooze fest of Thor the Dark World. Judging by the title of my video alone, we are well aware that Thor is in circulation once again with a sequel titled Thor Ragnarok, and honestly the trailer has a few brain-scratching comments from outsiders when I scrolled around. There were all these weird nitpicks that seemed to focus way too much on the shift of direction, as well as Thor shaving off his precious gold mane, and the Hulk speaking fluent English, much to the dismay of people for whatever reason because they hate change or they never read a goddamn comic book. I'm going to solely focus on why Marvel Studios needed to change the formula for the upcoming film Thor Ragnarok, and if you have been paying attention for this long, after watching the trailer for Thor Ragnarok, you'll know one of the main reasons why the formula changed is definitely because the Thor movies never broke real ground in the MCU. Spider-Man Homecoming was ousted in many people's eyes merely for mundane crap like being in the shadow of the Raimi films, yet that still pulled through. Ironically, there's change for the better and change for the worse, and since, incidentally, I brought up the Raimi films, we can talk about Spider-Man 3, a movie that tried to change too much, and we know how that turned out. Back to the topic of Thor, if the second movie was really as boring as critics say it was, I think the biggest cardinal sin of superhero movies in general is being boring, and that should be non-existent. It's not supposed to be boring, even if I wasn't very fond of Thor as a character when I was a kid. He's still supposed to be this larger-than-life god of thunder. This all goes back to my point of the directors taking too many things, too many inspirations from previous movies and shoving them into a new one to get some success. And going back to the previous films where pacing is a problem, imagine if they reeled that back in where you see that the pacing is broken up faster than a glass plate being F5 by Brock Lesnar. It wouldn't have worked out so well, so part of me is happy that the movie is going to be a little bit more varied to fit in with a possibly shorter runtime. People are thinking that this movie is probably going to be like over 2 hours long or maybe even shorter, but it seems like it's going to be a decent length at best. Although, allow me to insert the typical I came here to laugh at you meme here if this movie turns out to be great, because so many people think this movie is going to be bad for being at a shorter runtime than the previous Thor movies. Lol. I don't even care if it's a little bit shorter but entertaining, so don't count your chickens before they hatch. A good way to break up the monotony is by changing the formula, and that's the first positive that I could say that this Thor movie will probably have over the other two. The second thing that I vastly appreciate this new film for doing is the inclusion of Bruce Banner as a side character in Thor Ragnarok. Thor just being with Loki again will honestly make even more of an evidential repeat of Dark World, so things are being shook up once again with the Hulk being present. It adds such a unique side character to this movie that I think it will only serve to enhance the experience of general fans of these movies who are well aware of the run-ins that Thor and the Hulk had in the past as previous Avengers. We don't know the specifics, but one thing we don't want is an overglorified cameo role that doesn't stick. The last reason why Thor Ragnarok needed a change is based on the entire premise of something you have to do in a sequel, something very important each and every single time if you want to push the envelope, and that involves the attitude of the film trying to inject a fresh new setting while raising the stakes. We have another central and new baddie on screen. Hela is about to take over, so no conventional Loki, no dark elves running amok here. It's a new villain, and that means new rules. Then you have the Prisoner Planet, a section in Thor's journey which could lead to some very interesting fight scenes and dialogue, since the Hulk being there was quite a surprise to me, and apparently I even heard that Chris Hemsworth, he ad-libbed a line in there saying that, oh, that guy, I know him, I know the Hulk, he's a guy at work. That was ad-libbed then when he went to a charity drive and a child told him it would be pretty funny if he mentioned that the Hulk and Thor was at work together, like work buddies. So I thought that was interesting. Then you have Thor's hammer actually being broken, Mjolnir being demolished by Hela. It's almost symbolic. It's like an essence of the character being broken down even more as he's forced to be on this planet that he doesn't want to be a part of. He's forced to be a prisoner while Hela plans to take over Asgard. It might readily seem like there's a cluster of things going on, but even Chris Hemsworth, Thor's actor, cited changes needed to happen to be refreshing, and he said, I quote, "For me personally, I got a bit bored myself and I thought I got to try something different when talking about the Thor series." The road trip style of the movie, taking place in areas not central to Asgard, actually gives the film a good sense of the unknown, which I could say that reflects on a change for the better, because they chose not to stick to conventional storytelling, being confined in the same place. It could be one of the best Thor films yet, since we're going outside of the box even more, especially with the shift of not being typical. They are breaking traditions of the previous two films by upping the ante, making it funny, making Thor be placed in new situations, and adding new characters. There will be reservations, but will this movie meet all of our expectations? Well, we'll have to see what happens, but from what I see, injecting new life could not only reinvent the world, but set an example for any future Thor adaptations if successful. If we compare the additions to what they're adding on display to something like Dark Knight, which added a lot of new components to the stuff that carried over from Batman Begins, which was new, innovative takes to the pre-established lore, then you will see that sequels can up the ante and distance to what is good in a comic book film and what can become handled adequately. Only time will tell if Thor Ragnarok joins the cool crowd with what works and what doesn't. This is Renegade Operative signing off. Hopefully you guys enjoyed my opinion piece on why Thor Ragnarok needed to change the formula. I will see you guys next time. Check out my social media links right here in the description and in the video, and I will see you guys later. Take care.